Hi everyone! Welcome to my craft room for the You Make Me Happy card workshop. So tonight we are going to work on 3 different cards. This one says You on the front with the beautiful flowers, and our watercolor work will go on the inside on this one. And the sentiment are so much more to me than you'll ever know. You are flawless. So a 6x6 card with again some watercolor feature. And You Make Me Happy, where I got the name from. You Make Me Happy card workshop. So this was the card that named our workshop. So we're gonna start with this one. So let's turn the camera down to my desk so you can watch what I'm doing, and I hope you have a good time and enjoy the class. Alright, so before we get started, I thought we could go over some of the supplies that you're going to need. For adhesives, I'm a big fan of the Be Creative tape. I have a number of different widths, so I just grabbed some. Any of these will do. I have some foam tape, so that will be great. I'll definitely want some foam tape, or the pop dots are great too. I got my art glitter glue in a little fine tip bottle with a little needle that comes out. So it looks pretty much like a mechanical pencil end, and it can be really precise, and it's really awesome for putting these little embellishments on. Any glue will do, so that's great. So you need some glue. You're going to want some sort of a spritzing bottle. I'm sure if you have a plant bottle, they're great. The Distress Sprayer or the Ken Oliver's bottle are fabulous too. What else can I tell you? Purple tape is great for anchoring dies, and I'm going to be showing you a technique in cutting dies later, so you're going to want some purple tape. You're going to need a 12 by 12 paper trimmer, because we're going to be trimming some cards later. Put that back for now. I will also be using my Gemini Junior, so I just have my standard plates and my Gemini here ready to go. The watercolor brush. So I'm sure if you haven't seen these, they usually come with a lid. Mine appears to have gone missing, but they hold the water in the barrel of the brush and become like a water brush pen. These are great travel brushes, but they're awesome to use, and the price point is awesome compared to buying a whole bunch of other watercolor brushes or other art brushes. But if you don't have that, of course, normal watercolor brushes are perfectly fine. In fact, I'm going to be using both in this workshop, so so you might want to bring both. I have here a couple cups of water, one for dirty and one for clean water. So that's that, and that should be great. Oops, making a mess here. All right, so we're going to start with the You Make Me Happy card. I'll just put these to the side over here. Okay, so what I'm thinking actually is quite often with watercolor, you can color. So I used Tombow markers on this particular panel that you see here, and I'm going to show that technique first. But what I really like to encourage you guys to do is let's color all of the panels first and put them aside and let them dry, even overnight. So if you have time, that's a really great thing to do, because some of the blending magic can happen in the water sort of pooling on the card. So I'll show you and talk more about that as we go. But I think that you'll really quite appreciate it if you could just leave it overnight. Now, of course, as usual with any of our crafting techniques, if you want to take a craft gun or embossing gun to it and dry her up because you got to get this off to somebody in a hurry, you are absolutely welcome to do that. I'm just going to encourage, I just think what we should do for my recording today is I'm going to show you each of the watercoloring techniques through each of the 3 cards, and then I'm going to come back and put the cards together with actually some ones that I let dry overnight. So I took my own advice today. So starting with the You Make Me Happy, you will need so we basically need 2 panels, one from the You Mean So Much to Me with the teal, and you should have some card bases and envelopes in your kit, a 6x6 piece of paper. This has My Favorite Things Harmonious Hibiscus stamped on it, and this one is Fine Lined Flowers background. Okay, starting again. So here's my craft space. I thought we should start by going over some of the supplies that you're going to need, and maybe I can explain a little bit why I picked certain things, or where substitutions can happen. So first thing we'll talk about is your adhesives. So there's certainly plenty of options for adhesives. I'm really enjoying the Art Glitter Glue right now, so I just put some in a Crafter's Companion fine tip bottle, and it has this end on it that's kind of like a mechanical pencil, so you can get some really precise sort of applications with that, and it even comes with a needle stopper to stop it from drying up. Testing my depth perception. So I quite like that, but of course any of your favorite glue will work. This is the Be Creative tape. Comes in multiple widths. I just grabbed a few that I have. Anything you have that works for you will be just fine. Tape runners are great. Yes, so there you go for that. And I have foam tape. So the foam squares work, pop dots, whatever you have that kind of is a bit of a dimensional adhesive will work there too. Okay, so then I also have some purple tape. So purple tape is that that doesn't stick forever tape that the store carries. So what I like to use this for is securing my dies on the plates when I'm putting them through. That's one way. So I think I know I'll be showing you a technique about how to run some dies through in a unique way. So that will be useful for you. As far as tools, you will need a 12 by 12 paper trimmer. There's some trimming of the panels involved. The Gemini Junior and plates is what I use for my die cutting. A Cuttlebug, a Big Shot are excellent as well. The water brush that I'm talking about is something like this. It has the water in the barrel. Mine has lost its lid, but usually it has a lovely lid on there so you don't lose all your water out. These are, just as a side note, excellent for traveling. If you want to do some travel journaling, you can even bring it on a plane. You can just empty it out and then just suck a little bit of water up out of your cup on the plane and you're good to go. Water brushes, watercolor brushes. So I'm going to be showing, really you could interchange these with what I'm doing tonight. So just use what you have. So I have some water cups ready for myself. So when I do use my watercolor brushes, I have a dirty and a clean one. That's a good thing to have. I also have this Tim Holtz Distress sprayer. So you can use any sort of sprayer you like. The thing that people really love about the Tim Holtz is there's a bit of a control in terms of splatter versus splattering versus, like, so you get more droplets if you go slow, but if you go fast it's more misty. So that's what people really are loving about those buying exclusive art ones. So as far as coloring tools, what I am going to be teaching with is Tombow markers. So here I have the Tombow markers. Well, we can talk specific colors when we get to the actual cards, but I basically used 4 different colors. And alternatives that I'm also going to work with tonight to show you a watercolor technique is, you know, if you have your own stash of watercolor paints. So these are mine, so I'm going to bring those in tonight. And the other thing that you could bring is any water-based dye ink. So I can show you how to interchange some Distress oxides into your mix. So if you have some of those, you can, when you watch the video, you can decide whether that's another thing that you want to use or not use. Okay. So basically how I want to run the works. Oh, sorry, here, one more thing. I have these dies ready to go. So these are the Paper Rose dies. This one's the Banner 2 and this one's the Stitch Rectangle. What I like to do when I'm actually working in my space is I keep a magnetic sheet out. This is the Art Band magnetic storage sheet that actually fits in the plastic bins. But I also keep one separate that I can keep on my workspace to keep the dies that I'm working with on it. Then I don't lose them in my stuff. So yeah, so this is the Paper Rose Banner 2 that we're going to be using. This is the Studio Ketcha border trimmings die, and this is just 2 out of the Paper Rose Stitch Rectangle. So there's actually more options in that one and also on this banner one. So yeah, but these are the actual ones I'm using tonight. So just so they don't get lost on my desk, I pop them onto a magnetic sheet. So there's a quick hint for you especially if you work with lawn fawn a lot. Those little suckers are small, so it's a perfect way to keep them kind of tamed on your desk. Okay, so what I would like to get started with, we're going to actually, instead of just going through card by card by card, what I would like to do is actually start and color the watercolor pieces of our cards. So You Make Me Happy, in your kit you should have your sleeve with your craft background, and this is stamped with the Gina K Elegant Script stamp, and then I've got the black and You Make Me Happy sentiment and your panel that we're going to color. So I'm just going to take that and put that aside and then just put this all back up here. So then for the You Are So Much More to Me Than You Ever Know, in that one you should have your card base with your fine line floral already stamped on there. You should have two pieces, so you'll have the U embossed and die cut, and then a vellum background that will go on there. And you'll have your sentiment strip for the inside with the sentiment and your teal, but we're just going to keep, again, this panel out for coloring. And then You Are Flawless, because you are. Maybe you'll want to keep this for yourself because I believe in you and I think you are. So we're going to take out the big panel. Yours should be trimmed. I left mine longer. It's no big deal because I'm actually going to end up trimming it all in the end, so I just wasn't worried. But then you'll have a smaller version of the You Are Flawless embossed piece. You'll have this, a piece of black cardstock at 6x6, and you should have a 6x6 card base. And then just to note, you should have one more card base for You Make Me Happy, and then a little goodie bag. So that should cover what's in your kit. But while we went through there, I just pulled out these pieces that I want to work with. So I'm going to start with the You Make Me Happy, and we're going to do that with the Tombow markers first. And the water brush. So the Tombow markers I chose were a red, which is 847, the orange, which is 925, a kind of a corally pink, which is 905, and for the background sky, I chose 526, blue. It's got a bit of a periwinkle background in it that I absolutely loved, and it had a bit of a, I had a baby blue, but I just thought it got lost, so I went with a little bit darker. So we're going to start with the background, and what I'm actually going to do is actually zoom in a smidge here, and so you can see better what I'm doing, if I can. Huh. There we go. Okay, so hopefully you can see a little bit better what I'm doing now. So I'm going to start again, like I said, with the background. So what I want to do, so with Tombow markers, you can start with one color, and then you can blend two, or you can blend three, and if you get really good at this, I'm not sure I'm there yet, but you could blend even more. They're a water-based ink, which is what makes them so beautifully blendable, and they also hold their color when water is applied to it. So that's those are the key features. So how I start with this is I have my nice full bottle water brush, and I kind of keep this here to the side. It's a rag, or you can maybe bring some paper towel in. Very useful to have. So these nylon bristles clean up super easy. In fact, I just find just a little bit of a scrubby rub on my microfiber towel, and I'm usually good to go with them. But how I started with this particular panel is I just went around up close to the edges of the flowers, and then I took my water brush, and on my towel I get it going. So I give it a little bit of a squeeze to bring some of the water to the tip. Now that I know it's going, I can just bring this up and pull down some of the color that I've applied. Just like that. So I can go as long as I like. So if I want it a little bit lighter, you just keep, kind of like when you're blending with the Distress Oxides, you just keep going and it just blends out to nothing eventually. So depending on how rich of a pigmentation you want is how much you pull out. So pull down from the edge. But what I really like about starting at the edge of the flowers is it kind of allows a sense of shadow around the flower, because the darkest stays towards where behind the flower petal would be. So that's why I do it this way. So just keep pulling it down. Now if I want, I can actually add a scribble in there and just kind of move it around a little bit. So this is working well because it's on watercolor paper. I find you can blend Tombows a little bit, but of course on other papers. But what'll happen is the marks stay. They don't blend in. So wherever you scribble down your color, your nib, you're going to get the marks of the, sorry, trying to do two things at once. Think and tell you what I'm doing. So yes, you will end up getting sort of marks in your, you know, where you scribbled, and it'll show, and you don't want that. And I don't think, unless there's a technique that you're going for. I'm sure some artist out there, it's funny, you say these rules and then there's some artist out there that breaks them, and that's just awesome to me. But for the sake of this technique, watercolor, what I'm trying to say is watercolor paper is really where you want to go. Okay, so anyway, so I just went around all the way around. And so yeah, so that's essentially one color. So you can see how as you pull out, especially here in this nice big area, it just gets lighter and lighter and lighter until, you know, if I had the room, it would eventually disappear. So the one thing I do want to warn you about is Tombows don't like coloring on wet. So they're great for blending. So, but if I come back in here and my paper is wet, my Tombow is gonna kind of act like it's dried up, is what I've noticed. So what I'll do in that case, it doesn't ruin your Tombow, but what I'll do in that case, so this is the blue shop towel, but any paper towel will do, I'll just run it until I see a nice rich pigment back down on my paper towel, and it'll go again. So it didn't ruin it, but it doesn't work. So it's worthwhile knowing. So rather than continuing on and just coloring the whole card, I actually have one done, but I want to show you a couple more techniques on this panel. Like we need to get to some blending for sure. And then I'll have one that I can use for assembly, so you won't have to watch me sit here and color my whole card. But I do want to note that if you look here, there's these sprigs of, I know there's a word for them in the flower world, but these dots that come up from the little seedlings or whatever, the pods that are going to release their seeds. I actually went ahead and just colored through them. I didn't worry about them because I actually think that what I might do, and I didn't do it on this one, but I think it would really look sharp, is to actually take a gel pen and color, or a glitter pen, and go in and color those all at the end. So I would just go ahead and just color right through those and not worry about it. If, however, you want them to match the flowers, it's probably a worthwhile thing to take your time and go around each little circle, because with watercolor, things layer from lightest to darkest. So if you want those to look a nice coral color, it's not going to work. It'll turn purple on the blue or whatever blend you're doing. So that's something to be aware of with this stab set. So anyway, I'd like to go back and show you a two-color blend. So basically, I'll just start in the center here and just drop some color in on the center. So that was that pinky color, that's number 905. So I don't have to meet them. I can bring them together with the water. Get my brush going. Just kind of pull down from the orange, pull up from the coral. and move it around. So again, this is really up to you. If you want it to look more pastel-y, pull it out, pull the water out a bit. Now I've got some pooling going on in here, which is perfectly fine. Watercolor paper can handle it. But let's just say, I'm gonna say, I'd like it to be a little bit more dry and dry faster so that I can add some more color, because remember the Tombow Colors markers don't love coloring into wet. So I just kind of drop a corner of a paper towel, and as you can see, it just wicks it right up. Super quick. So now I have a little bit more control over the amount of water on there. So I'm going to come back in with some more orange, but I'm going to actually start at the edge like this, and then I'm just going to pull it down. So I'm just going to stop there, and I'm just going to show you closer in the camera sort of how the water is helping to blend the two colors together. Oops. Let's see if I can. Okay, over here. There's the camera. I found it. All right. So that's two. But if I'm not thinking this is vibrant enough, there's nothing saying I couldn't add a third color. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to blend this out first. Like that. There we go. All right. So just over here where it's a bit more dry, so I don't have any problems, I'm just going to start adding 847, which is our dark red. I'm going to hold it here. Just so the one thing about the Tombows, if you don't have them, is there's they're double-sided. So you've got your brush side on this side, and you've got your nib side on this side, which is great for lettering. But I also find, like, if you are going to color in these dots, the nib sides kind of gives you a bit more control for that. Just a side note. Anyhow, just keep pulling it down. Then maybe you want to pull up a bit from this color into the red. The other thing is I can come back, like pick a more dry spot and add a little bit of orange. Just kind of blend it in. Like that. Now I'm starting to get a little bit of layering going on, a little bit more color. It's a bit more vibrant. So I actually purposefully chose embossing for these images to help control the water a little bit when we're watercoloring. The embossing edges can act as a barrier to keep them from flowing out onto other things. It's not perfect, and these stamps are quite fine, but if you can be even, it's quite a forgiving technique, but you can be even, I don't know, sloppier, I guess is a word, or more quick. I'm not quite sure how to put that, but you can actually, anyway, yeah, you can go a little bit sloppier by using a thicker image stamp with embossing powder, because it will definitely act as a dam to stop your watercolor pooling from getting out, which can be really handy. So that's two, but I also want to show you one more way that I actually really appreciated and liked. So I'm just going to show you that close up. So you can see I've got basically the three colors. I don't perfectly blend them on purpose. I let the water do its work in some of the flow of the water and the wicking of the water, just to kind of bring the inks together. Once it's dry, if you're not satisfied and you think it needs more color, you can add. But I do you sort of start just generally, like with crafts, you start small, add a little bit, and then a little bit, and then a little bit. I didn't find when I did the cards that I even needed to come back and do more. I thought the first round was perfectly perfect. So, but I do want to show you one more thing with the Tombow markers that worked out really cool. And that is essentially blending over each other. So basically what I did was I actually laid down, so this is 925, it's the orange one. I laid down quite a bit of color. I wasn't worrying that I was going to blend later. I could leave some just to give it a bit of, see if what that does. Anyway, then I filled it in. So that's a lovely orange on by itself. But what I did do was I actually kind of tried to get it to dry a smidge. Then I went over it. See, damp is cool. Pooling, not cool. So I went over it with the red, right on over top, and I thought that was stunning. And I'm not talking about myself, I'm talking about the markers. Yeah, see my color, I can see where the marker is actually fighting me a little bit, but look at that. All right, so those are the Tombow. So that's what I wanted to show you with the Tombow markers and coloring with Tombow markers, except for one more thing. So if you have a craft mat, such as this one, this is the waffle flower, but even those Teflon craft mats work great. So there. Just gonna put this back down in my waffle flower. So let's say, so I've done this quite loosely. That's a good word for it. I've done this quite loosely, my blending. I'm looking for a very loose look. If you were looking for a little bit more of a controlled look and wanted to control your watercolors a little bit more, a way to use your Tombows is just to color some down onto your mat. And then you can even spritz a smidge of water, and now you have a watercolor. So I just take my watercolor brush or this brush, whichever one you want to use, and just kind of go in and color it exactly the way you want it to go. All right. Just like that. Okay. So like I said, I have some panels already dried that I'm going to show you shortly. So I'm not going to finish my panel. I'm going to let you can pause and finish that panel, or watch the whole video through. Anyway, so that's where that one's going. And I'll show you. This is my dry one that I had come. Whoops, there we go. So that was basically using the techniques I just explained, especially right here on the bottom here. That was the one where I put down all the orange colored marker and then went over it with the red. Here I left some pooling going on and let it dry, and that's kind of what let that happen there. And like I said, I went right on over the flowers, and I think I'm gonna, whoops, I'm gonna go over with that with a gel pen, and I think it'll be awesome. Okay, so the next panel I want to work with is the 6-But. Nope. What do I want to do? This one is from You. You are much more to me than you will ever know. So we're still dealing with the same flowers. Nope, I changed my mind. Sorry about that. We're going to do the one from You Are Flawless. So this one is called Harmonious Hibiscus. And what I'm going to show you with this one is a wet on wet technique of coloring. So now, again, you could use your Tombows and color to create a little palette for yourself. Honestly, for this technique, I think you might go through your markers pretty fast. Now, doing it for a little controlled little parts, perfect, totally do that. But for what I'm going to show you right now, I think using your either your Distress Oxides or your watercolor palettes are probably the best. So I have my watercolor palette here. I'm just going to slide over just a smidge so you can see what I'm doing. Dun, dun. All right, so this is a wet on wet technique. And again, like I said earlier, I purposefully chose embossing for this one because it acts as a hold on the water. But what you're going to want to do is you're going to take your sprayer and you're going to want to give your paper a little bit of a spray down. And then to prep your watercolors, I assume if you have them, you may know this, but I just usually like to give my watercolors a generous spritz because it's the moistness of the paper and the paint that make this technique really shine. So it's essentially, I'm going to go to my watercolors for this one instead of the other watercolor brush. This is again another very loose technique. It's not meant to be precise at all. Some water may in fact leak out into the background. I don't see that as a big deal, but I can show that if you catch it. Anyway, so basically I misted my paper just with a little bit. So now what I want to do is I'm going to work on a specific flower. I'm actually going to add even a bit more water to that particular flower. And then what I want to do is pick up, I'm actually going to use this brush, pick up the color that I want. I'm going to start with this one called Madder Lake Red Light, and I'm going to just pop it in there, and you'll see that the water is actually picking it up and wicking away from where I actually touched it. So if I touch it, it just kind of follows the little riverlets of water. Okay, so this, like I said, I really want this technique to be super wet. I'm going to move these out. I don't think you really need to see my watercolors as much as they're in the picture. So again, this is where my wet and clean jars come in handy. So I'm just going to clean that up. The other thing I do, just as a trick that I haven't mentioned, is I do keep this rag beside me. I sometimes just put it on my knee, so after I give my brush a quick rinse with the water, the dirty water, I might rub my brush on my knee just like this with the rag on it to clean it up. But actually what I find with this technique is there's not a significant amount of brush cleaning. It's more that you're worrying about not cross-contaminating your palette more than anything. But so I just keep dropping, and you can see it's just blending and following the little rivers all by itself. And if it's not really moving, just add a smidgen more water. I don't have the problem that can happen is if the pools get too big, they're obviously going to go over the embossing. But basically, you just use the tip of your brush just to kind of move some of the water around, help it follow a path that you want it to follow. Yeah, see, I've already got some. So I have some breaking out. Show you a little closer here. So some is trying to break out on me. So what I'm going to do is I just have my paper towel. And I'm just going to create a little bit of a point with my paper towel, like that. And then I just kind of drop it into the water where it's come out. Or even dab a little smidgen off. And sometimes, sometimes if you think the pool is getting super big, you can always drop this little pointy in and it'll just kind of wick up some of the water. But as best you can, I encourage you to leave the pools of water. Because that's sort of where the blending magic happens and why I'm encouraging. I don't know if I said it already, but I really think we should leave these overnight instead of blast. You can absolutely blast them with a craft gun, but the magic of the pool of the water drying is what makes these look so cool. So I really do encourage you to leave them overnight. So for this particular panel, the look that I was looking for was a real pop of color. See, I have it coming out in drips and drabs. I don't know, bet you didn't notice that before. It's gonna happen. This is, like I said, this is an imperfect technique, and it still looks amazing. So back to what I was saying, I was looking for the color pop on the creamy white background of the watercolor paper. So I didn't color the sky background, and I also didn't color the stems. I really wanted to stick with the color of the flower being the feature on this card. So that's what we're gonna do. So even the thing about leaving it overnight is when you do step away, some of these little pools can break out, but they're pretty soft. And once we cut the panel, I think you're going to find that it's so not the thing that gets focused on. So just again, if you're doing this as you go, the paper's going to dry a bit. So I find, and I've done probably 4 or 5 or 6 or a dozen of these, I wet the whole paper once, but then when I'm actually coming down to this flower, I give it a little bit more of a spritz and make sure that I can see a bit of the pool. So here, what I'm going to actually do is try to see if I can do this in a way that brings the camera a little bit closer. So I've got a little bit of yellow. Okay, hang on, let's get this center. All right. There we go. This is hard. There. So watch how cool it looks as it's moving around. Now the edges, of course, are going to lose because I don't have anything stopping there. I'm going to bring in this other color. And just watch the blending magic happen. All right. So yeah, so back to my table. I'm gonna Try to get some of this seepage under control. But I'm also going to direct some of this with my brush. These little pools of water, direct them into each other, away from each other. And then I can let that dry again overnight. So I'm just gonna pop around it. Make sure that there's no super pools on the edges that could potentially catch. Because water, when they find each other, will direct one another. So anyway, so my point is I went around just the outside and dried it a smidge to try to encourage it to sort of stay into the flower. All right, so I'm gonna put that one aside. And I'm gonna show you the one, actually I have two that I've made. This one is still drying, and I tried to go super pooly, pigmenty with it, and you can see there's some, it's okay. This one turned out super nice, but again, I have stuff breaking out. Right there. Right there, Nancy. Right there. Ah. Trust me, in live classes I have trouble with this too. So, anyway, so it does have a bit, but when we actually cut our frame out, that's not going to show. I'm going to trim it down, and I just think that looseness of it, it pops for me. I'm okay with that. But if you were looking for more control, again, just use a smaller brush and just paint it in as you would like. Okay, so let's say you don't have, Nancy, I don't have watercolors, I don't have Tombows, but I do have a really nice selection of Tim Holtz Distress Oxide. How could I use that? All right. So for colors I picked, I have Abandoned Coral, Candied Apple, let's not use that one. Squeezed Lemonade. I could do the background with some tumbled glass. I could use some mowed lawn and some shabby shutters. Let's see, let's move this up a bit like that. There we go. So those are some colors I chose. So we got mowed lawn for a dark green, shabby shutters for a lighter green, for some of the... no, I'm going to put that aside. I was thinking of the other stamp that has the stems in it. Don't need it. But I do have the tumbled glass, which we could put on the back if you want, and this for the flowers. So there we go. So essentially, how I do this is I just smoosh onto my mat. Some of the ink. This should be lots. Let's give it a little bit of a spritz. I'm actually even going to give this a spritz. And I'm going to go back to my water brush like this. So all I do is I just pick up, move it in, drop it in, same as I did with the other wet on wet technique with my watercolor. All right, got my brush, just give it a quick, and then I got some Abandoned Coral, and drop that in. I am not being precise at all with this, at all. Just dropping it in and letting the water do its work. So, done, that one. Again, over here. Okay. If you're having trouble with folding like this, you can always tape it down to a board. If you need more water, the cool thing about the water brush is you just give it a squeeze while you're working. And you don't even need to pick up a water spritzer. Just keep going. So for this one, I actually left white background showing. Just dropped some in. Kind of sloppy, kind of controlled. Super loose. And then I'll put that aside to dry. So there, that's the coloring part. So again, as earlier, if you want the blue background, just pick up your colors. Because you don't necessarily want your especially if you're working with oranges and yellows, you don't want your background to go green or brown. That would be kind of rude. Just dump some tumbled grass down, smoosh, smoosh, smoosh. I didn't even spritz it this time. I actually just used my water brush and squeezed it to dump some water into the tumbled glass. And then I can just come in and loosely color in as loosely or precisely as I like. Just adding some blue to the background. All right, so I'm just going to put that aside. So now we're at the point where you are going to want to start to put these babies together. Tidy my space up a smidge so I don't accidentally dump water on my stuff. That would be so bad. Maybe you could tell me in Facebook the horrible stories of ruining projects by... No, don't focus on the horrible. Why would I ever say that? Don't do that. I want to hear happy stories, right? Okay, so you make me happy. This is the card we're going to work on putting together. So you should have your finished dried panel, your craft cardstock with the Gina K Elegant script stamped on it. I used the StazOn pigment ink. I have a You Make Me Happy sentiment strip embossed in whites and a black panel. And then you're going to need a card base. Okay. So the first thing that I want to show you is a trick that I did to make this panel, like, so there's a lot of factors in this measurement, and I'm not a measurer mathy gal, but I wanted to make sure that this black edge frame from this black cardstock went evenly around the inside of the craft cut banner panel and still all evenly fit the front of the card base. So I have a trick for you. So basically what I did is you work from the top down. So you start with, so this is, the top is your biggest cut. So going over to my dies, I have the Studio Katcha stitched banner 2 dies. I've got 2 ones that I used. If you want, a rectangle would work, an oval would work. Once you say this technique and you look at your dies, I'm sure that you'll find something even if you don't have this particular die. So I'm going to start with the biggest one. and I'm going to cut the panel out of the craft cardstock first. So I've got my Gemini here and my plates and my purple tape, because I have over and over and over, well, maybe not that many times, let's not exaggerate, but I have definitely had dies move. So basically for this card, I wanted it on kind of down the left side with a bit of a border, so I just kind of line it up where I wanted onto the front of the cardstock, and then I actually secured it down with a bit of purple tape. And this tape, the new style, needs a bit of a rub, so I give it a rub and I run it through my machine as per your machine's instructions. Okay. So that's beautiful. This tape is awesome because it won't rip your paper. So now I have this, which I think is great to keep for another card. And I have my front panel. So I'm just going to put that back. So now what I do is I take the two panels. So I've got my black rectangle 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 and my craft 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I'm going to lay them over top of one another just like that, exactly how I want them. And then I take the small one and I lay it in here. I'm gonna have to put this down. I was trying to do it in the air for some reason. So I have my papers together like that. And then I have my die, so I'm going to put it in exactly where I want it, eyeballing to make sure that I've got a nice even border around it. Then hopefully, without moving anything, I just pop this off. Then I take my hand, hold that down, secure this. Oh, I moved it. I'm gonna double check because I don't want this to go wrong. You might as well take the time. You've done all this, make sure it's going well, okay? I'm gonna use bigger pieces of tape. I'm drying. Probably the problem. Alright, there it is. Alright. So I got it on my panel, on my plates. I'm just going to run it through. Oh, I shifted. Oh, how rude. How rude. Trust me, it normally works. So what you should end up with is this. So what I've done is I took the craft cardstock after all of that, and I used glue, double-sided tape, and I just taped that down to the black craft background. And then on the other side, I've got my foam tape ready to go. So what I'm going to do So I'm just gonna move along from the die cutting mistake. So I'm thinking what's going on is this newer purple tape might not be quite strong enough to hold down the die, or I wasn't patient enough in my flipping of my hands and I moved it. If you're careful and take your time, I promise you it works. But if you are having trouble with purple tape, the next best thing is a Post-it note. And that will hold it down for sure, okay? So learn from me. So I'm just gonna put these plates aside for the second. So we're here. All right, so now I should have this, and my card base. I'm just gonna give my card base a quick fold. Now I'm looking at this panel, and I could put the whole thing on there and then just put that on top, and it will be beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. However, perhaps you think this part of your panel looks a little better than this part of your panel. That's completely up to you. I'm very happy with the whole thing. You could also take a strip off and use it in another card. Just a hint, just thought you'd like to know that, but I'm gonna go ahead and just work with the whole thing. I think it looks awesome. So all I'm doing is just gonna secure this watercolor panel down to the front of my card with a bit of tape. Super quick. I'll move up so you can see what I'm doing, but it's basically just taping the card. So I do really like the Be Creative tape on these watercolor panels. The tooth of the watercolor panel, that the feel that it's not so smooth, it's a little rough, tends to make certain tapes not want to stick. You can even see the Be Creative tape lifted a bit, but once you burnish it or give it a good rub, it should actually. So I just do this. I hold the panels like this and just pop that up. And I'll just give it a good rub. Like I was just about to say, give that a good rub and that'll hold down beautifully. It's very strong tape. So I've got my craft panel and my double-sided doodly-doo. Sometimes my fingernails do not want to cooperate. I have seen it where if you have that problem, tweezers can sometimes get underneath these tape backings a little bit better. Here's a trick. All right, but I just center this on the card. Like that. And then I just used a little bit more foam tape to put that there. And some of my embellishments I put around. You can see on my sample, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 of them. People seem to like odd numbers. I don't know why. It feels more balanced to us. But that's how that card's gonna come. Okay. So I'm just gonna keep going because I know okay. You are flawless. We're gonna put this baby together. So you need your 6x6 panel. Looks something like that in your colors. And you need your black panel. You need your You Are Flawless embossed panel. And your 6x6 card base for this. So basically we're gonna do that frame technique again. Give it a go. So again, starting from the top, I've got these 2 stitched rectangles. So I'm gonna start with the biggest one again, and I'm just gonna cut the center lining up with my eye. So what I like to do at this stage is I take a note of which way the flowers are going. So I've got the big flower kind of up in this corner, this flower is opening this way. That'll become important later when we're actually putting together the card to remember which way you cut it, because we're not measuring. If we're out a little bit this way or a little bit this way or a little bit this way, and then you turn it, this won't match like it should when we cut it. So that's a tip for you. So I'm gonna grab, because I had a little bit of trouble with that purple tape, I have this tape here, it's Post-it note tape. I'm gonna grab that and try it. So basically, I'm just gonna, I eyeball pretty much everything. I'm not a great measurer. Sometimes I even find if I eyeball things, I actually do a better job. I don't know, hopefully that doesn't sound like you know, some people try to say they, never mind. Anyway, hopefully you understand what I'm getting at. So I'm just gonna run that through. And then we're gonna try again, and this time I'm confident it's gonna work. So again, I would keep that. That's absolutely beautiful to use for another card. So I'm going to bring out my smaller one to cut the black piece again. So I'm going to end up trimming down this front panel, but I'm not going to do it just yet. I want to do that at the end because I want to make sure. All right, I told you guys. It was this way, okay. So it's not critical at this state to keep this way up, but it's still good to keep in mind, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. If you were to lose track at this stage when you're cutting, it's not going to mess up the card. It's later when you're actually trying to put the two pieces together that I'll show you when we get there. Okay, so I'm going to pop this off. I've got my Post-it note tape from last time and it's pretty strong, so I'm just gonna go with it, give it a rip, and off we go. All right. So another great piece for another card. I'll just take this, put it to the side. All right, I'm back. Okay, so now when you actually line this up, so see what happens here is I'm not 100%, you can see how the inner thing looks kind of wonky. Well, that means to me that I haven't got this lined up properly to see there again. If I try to line them up, that's obviously not the way this goes. So you have to turn it until you have the frame on the center properly lining up, which is right there. Ta-da! Okay. So this front panel I want to trim, but because I want it to stay this centered, this has to stay centered in the card. When I'm trimming the front panel, I'm just going to trim a bit away from each side rather than, like, if I wanted it to be an 1/8 inch border, or sorry, yeah, an 1/8 inch border on a normal square without a cutout, I might just cut a 1/4 inch from both sides and that would be fine. But this time, because of the nature of having this and wanting it to stay centered, you have to cut off a smidge from each side. So that's what we're gonna do. In my case, actually, I think I'm gonna go a little bit more. I'm actually gonna cut a quarter off of each side. There we go. So, like I said, what you cut off one side, you want to cut off all sides to help keep the square centered. So, because the square is visually centered, it's not measured centered. So, now, if you're better at measuring than I am, please go ahead and measure all you would like to do. So, I got to try to refine what I'm doing here again. That's good. So there. Okay, so now all I'm just going to do is just tape this panel to the front. I didn't use pop dots or anything yet. That's weird. That's too weird. I think I had it the first time. Yeah, I did. Okay. Just gonna put that down. So now I want to put So what I'm looking to do is I want this popped off up with foam tape and this sitting on the card base. So what I'm going to do is there's a couple of things. You can take this and hold it down onto the card base and just take a making sure I had a pencil nearby. Now you can run a little mark around there, which you'll never see once you have the card put together. And then you can center your flawless, because yours is smaller, it'll actually work better for you this way. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to line them all up. This is the second way to do it, is just kind of put it where I think it should go, line this over top, decide if I like it, and then I'm just going to hold it. I'm actually going to use the glitter glue because I can, so I'm just going to run a bit of glue and hold it down on that side. Sorry, I'm holding the pin in my mouth while I'm trying to talk to you. That was just silly. But anyway, the point is I wanted to be able to work with one hand, so I used the glue instead of perhaps the tape, which I'd need both hands to rip or cut. So I just grabbed the glue. And now just glue a little bit on each side, because what's really going to hold this card together is when you get this foam taped all down. So I'm just going to take the back of the panel, turn it over, run some pieces of foam tape around. I think what I'll do is I'll go close-ish to the edge. By close-ish, I think I'm about 1/8 of an inch out. That way, if that other panel were to side to slip. At least it has something to stop it, and I could refix it later. It won't happen. It'll be perfectly fine. I just center this baby. Oops, better make sure it's going the way I want it to. Top. So now it's just nicely popped off. I'm pretty generous with my foam tape. If you weren't sitting here waiting for me, I'd actually probably run an extra piece around here and on the outside. So that's something you can consider. So then what I did was I just took 3 of the gems and, well, 6 of the gems actually, and I took a big one and 2 small ones and my super duper precise glue pen and just like a dot, 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 and then I secured my gems down to the card. So then it would be finished. So there's that. Now we're on to our last card, and there's one more trick I wanted to show you with the layering of the die cutting, and then it will be really quick to put together. And if you've been following along and doing the cards, awesome. Or you can maybe get to making your cards if you decided to watch this all the way through. So I'm going to make sure this panel is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 first. So I'm just going to quickly, yeah, it is. Okay, good, perfect. So that's going to go on in the inside, but what I wanted to do, so with this card, we've got this kind of we got the teal border mat sticking out from the front of the card. So it's important that that matches essentially the swoop. You want that to kind of, there we go. You want to make sure that when you cut this, that this panel matches with the upper panel. So I'm going to show you a trick for that. So if you don't have the Studio Catch-A border die, any sort of edge die will do. I'm sure you probably have something in your stash. I use this one. So that's the one I'm going to show you. The Studio Catch-A comes with this stitched dot line one as well. And I know Lawn Fawn and Pink Fresh have some really nice ones as well. So take a look for those if you don't have anything like this in your kit. But it also works with a straight edge as well. So this trick. So just keep that in mind. So you're going to need your teal cardstock and your card front that has the Fine Line Florals. So this is the Fine Line Florals stamp set from My Favorite Things. And what you do, so you have your score line on the middle that acts as sort of your straight line. So what you're going to do is this teal card, you want to move it just over the line. So there it is up against the line. I'm going to just scooch it down just a smidgen, as much as I want it to show sticking out from the card. So another way to tell is to look at how much white is showing. That much white is how much teal will show when you're done. Hopefully that makes sense. So I'm actually going to use purple tape because it won't rip my paper. And I'm going to tape this together to make sure it's nice and secure. So I'm actually going to tape it at the top like that, and at the bottom, like that. Okay, then on this side, knowing that it doesn't quite come to the edge, I'm going to anchor my border die, whichever way you choose. If you want it facing out, the hills going out this way, or if you want them to be valleys, that's your choice. But I'm just going to do it this way. So I just put that down, and then I'm actually going to go back to this one and just anchor that down. So what I'm doing is I have to make sure that it's going through both pieces of cardstock. So I'm just going to hold that up to the light really quickly, and it is. It should. I mean, it was only a little bit of a border, but just to be safe. So now I'm going to run this whole unit like this through my die cutter. Okay, so taking it apart. So now I have this teal piece, and if I put it straight up against the line, it should, and it does, stick out just a little bit. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to tape that down. So in this case, I'm going to put my tape on the inside of the card base. Oopsies. Because how I'm going to make sure it goes on straight is I'm going to hold the card like this. So I don't know if I got it like this, but then I'm closing it sort of and knocking, we call this knocking, but butting the paper, the teal paper up into the fold, and then I'm just going to close it. Now I have it done. Nice. So this goes, of course, here. So the idea of what I was thinking with the cut is it kind of is a little peeky preview of the pretty flowers on the inside. So I'm just going to tape that down. And then finally, I'll just tape this in quick and easy. So one thing I wanted to mention to you guys while I was doing this workshop is that I am the class coordinator for the Paper and Ink Boutique. So I if you guys tell me some great ideas you have for workshops and things that you want to learn, I tell our instructors, or maybe if I can come up with it, we will definitely try to make that happen for you. Oops, I did that a little too close to the fold, which is making it hard to close. If that happens, just give it a close. Maybe get your bone folder out and just give it a rub and it'll work. Okay. So what I was saying, if you have any great ideas for classes, please, please, please go ahead and drop me a note. You should have my email because it's the one that I used for the important information about your class. So I know you have it. And you can always email me and let me know some great ideas that you might have. All right, so you should have in your kit a little vellum U background and the black embossed stamped U. So that just goes here on the front of the card. You can use I used a bit of glue so I could stay behind. Because vellum being so completely see-through, I wanted a bit of control over where the tape was, so I just run a little smidgen. Doesn't take a lot. It can hold. And just pop that on there. And your card is complete. That's super pretty. All right, so I know you guys have waited very patiently for this recording. Thank you so much for that.